Hi, I'm Scott Wolf, and I want to talk with you about Walt Disney's go-to entertainer, Wally Boag. Walt Disney was a huge fan of Wally's, and Wally played such an important role in Disneyland history. When I was growing up and my family would visit Disneyland, the first thing that we would do is run over to the Golden Horseshoe in Frontierland to get our reservations for the Golden Horseshoe Revue stage show because it was very popular and we wanted to get there before tickets would run out. That show was a favorite of mine, and it was a favorite of Walt Disney's. It ran from 1955 until 1986, and it starred the incomparable Wally Boag. There's Wally in the Golden Horseshoe on Disneyland's opening day, July 17, 1955. That's Wally at the left. Wally started in show business in 1939 as a dancer in vaudeville, but soon after he started entertaining audiences with his routine of making balloon animals, doing ventriloquism, playing the bagpipes, but all with a unique comedy flair. This is one of Wally's costumes from the Golden Horseshoe Revue, and it was a gift to me, and I just treasure it. For the 10,000th performance of the Golden Horseshoe Revue, Walt Disney chose to broadcast it on his Wonderful World of Color television series. Here's his name inside the jacket. This might have been the jacket that he wore on television. While that show was quite different than the typical show, with extra special guests and acts, Wally performed his role on television exactly as Disneyland guests got to experience it.
Well, I just happen to have a little something here, a little something called a Boagaloon, a little toy balloon that will enable you to tell people's personality just by the way they blow it up. Let me show you how it works. You see, the average and normal person will blow a balloon something like that. That's the average and normal type. And then we have the straightforward type. Some people are a little backwards in life. Naturally, the backward person, Oh, I've got talent. Then we have the scatterbrain. Their mind jumps around a bit. Their balloon would do the same thing. There we are. Hey, I think we have a little income tax trouble right there. Now, to get the message, you have the person wrap up all of these thoughts, put them all together, and by doing that, you find out something more about them. I've made quite a name for myself doing this. I don't like it either, but... Say, now, you've heard of pink elephants. Here's an elephant in color right here, looking a little something like that elephant right there. Oh, it's nothing, I can tell by the applause. Now, let's, Oh, it's so hot in here today. What'd you expect, feathers? This is a Hollywood convertible.
The balloons that Wally used were not the typical thinner balloons typically seen for making balloon animals. These were Boagaloons, and they were sold in Disneyland. This is actually one of the Boagaloon sets, and they're very special to me because Wally personally gave these to me. There's a caricature of Wally on it because after seeing the show, you remembered him. And back here, it reminds you to see Wally Boag at the Golden Horseshoe. Now, I haven't opened these since Wally gave them to me, and I thought I would open it right now so you could see what's inside. It seems wrong to decapitate him like that. Sorry, Wally. Inside here are some actual Boagaloons and some instructions for how to make your own Boagaloon animals. And I just noticed that he signed it. He wrote 1955 next to the photo of him, and then under that, 2007, same guy, W. Boag. Now here's a photo of Wally and me where he made not a balloon animal, but a balloon clown nose. He was so creative, and Walt Disney knew that. This is a letter from Walt Disney that I saw hanging in Wally's house, and Wally let me take a picture of it. In it, Walt wrote, "I can't remember how many times I've seen the show, but I always find it stimulating to be there and watch the responses of the audience. And although I practically know the routine by heart, it's always new and exciting." You see, Wally was doing exactly what Walt wanted. He was bringing joy to his Disneyland guests. Maybe people didn't remember Wally by name, but they remembered the guy who spit out his teeth in the show. At the end of the show, during the song Pecos Bill, one of the performers would playfully hit Wally, and Wally would start spitting out his teeth. In reality, they were beans, but then he'd keep spitting more and more, and there seemed like an endless supply. And when you thought he was done, he'd still spit out more. But it wasn't just spitting out his teeth that was so funny. It was his movements and expressions that really made it so hilarious and memorable. It didn't take long for Walt to have Wally involved in all kinds of things beyond just the horseshoe show. In 1955, to help promote Disneyland, Wally and his Golden Horseshoe co-star Don Novis hosted a daily radio show called Walt Disney's Magic Kingdom, and later it was called Your Happy Holiday. These are some of Wally's press photos from the show. The show featured celebrities, and it allowed park guests to ask them questions. There's Wally with actor Vincent Price inside the horseshoe. The show would also tour the park with various families. This photo is at Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, and this one is at the Peter Pan flight. Each week a family would receive a golden key which gave the whole family lifetime admission to Disneyland. This family was one of the recipients of the golden key. When Walt's Mickey Mouse Club television series debuted in 1955, Wally was the first guest star that they had on, a choice obviously made because of Wally's appeal to both young and old alike. He would appear on that show a number of times. In 1957, Wally had a song written for him about his Boagaloons, which he sang on the Mickey Mouse Club.
First you give a little twist, then another little twist. Blow your troubles clear up to the moon. Blow a Boagaloon. Now you make a little dog, make a funny little dog. While you work you hum a happy tune. Biggly bo 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 blow a Boagaloon.
What a dancer. Wally was just a great all-around entertainer, and he was the perfect MC for various events, and in later years, he would tour the country promoting some of Disney's latest releases and re-releases of their animated films in theaters. This was long before home video. Wally traveled around the country doing free 30-minute shows at places like shopping malls and department stores. In this publicity shot, he's dressed as the Mad Hatter to promote an Alice in Wonderland theatrical re-release. The troupe would appear on local television shows and even do stops at hospitals, not to promote anything, but just to bring joy to sick children. Here's a promotional shot of Wally with Baloo and King Louie for the Jungle Book tour. Here's Wally and his Golden Horseshoe co-star Fulton Burley promoting Pete's Dragon at the White House. The girl in the picture is President Carter's daughter, Amy. Be sure to watch my video about Fulton and those promotional tours. Now, here's some photos of Wally and Fulton dressed as Disneyland tour guides for a show that they did for employees for Disneyland's 10th anniversary. I actually have the script for that show. Now, it's not in the best condition, being almost 60 years old, but I just love stuff like this because it gives a real glimpse into the past. I want to read you a little bit from their tour guide routine. Wally said, "I don't want to say anything, sweetie, but weren't you 3 minutes late today?" And Fulton says, "Oh, I was. And did Bob punish me?" Wally says, horrified, "You don't mean..." And Fulton says, "Yes, he made me watch 3 Golden Horseshoe shows on my own time." Now, this one is a little more risque, but this was just for employees. Fulton says, "Careful with that whip, you might get hurt." And Wally replies, I know. I accidentally hit one of my male guests and he invited me up to his apartment." It wasn't just performing that Wally was involved in. All while continuing with the Golden Horseshoe Revue, Walt asked Wally to work with WED, which is now known as Walt Disney Imagineering, the company that designs and builds Disneyland. I asked Wally about the Tiki Room, and here's what he told me.
Walt called me up and asked me to join WED and be a writer. So he's smart, I was writing between shows.
Oh, no kidding?
Yeah. Fulton was next door, so Fulton helped me too with it. The two of us wrote practically the Tiki Room. And I was Jose. Start squawking when I'm talking.
I love it.
And he did such a good job with Michael. He did Michael.
You can still hear Wally as the voice of Jose and Fulton as the voice of Michael in the Tiki Room, both in Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World. In the early days of the Tiki Room, there was an audio animatronic parrot outside with a straw hat. It acted like a circus barker, beckoning people to come in and see the show, and Wally voiced that bird as well. The problem was the guests loved it, a little bit too much. You see, guests would stop to see the bird, and it became so crowded that it had to be taken away. Here's a clip of that bird from an episode of Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color.
Aloha! It is showtime now in Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. Hurry, hurry to Tiki Room. Tikis make drum go boom. Magic is happening. All the birds and flowers sing. Better come see this thing. Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. Come to the Tiki Room.
Now stop there. Let me rewind just a little. If you look at the crowd watching the Barker bird, there's Wally amongst them. This is a program from Walt Disney's first live stage show outside of Disneyland. It was called Disneyland USA and was performed at Radio City Music Hall. Walt wanted top quality entertainment for this special production. If you look inside, you can see that the show had just that. It featured the top specialty acts in entertainment. Each segment of the show represented a different land inside the park. Tomorrowland had soloist Patsy Kelly, the music hall Corps de Ballet below, and Kirby's Flying Ballet suspended from wires above in an undersea performance recreating Disneyland's submarine voyage. There was a segment featuring the Marquis family touring the park, but the family was Jean DeChoy's famous Marquis chimpanzees. I would have loved to have seen that. The Radio City Music Hall Rockettes were dancing bluebirds during the Fantasyland segment. Main Street had actual Main Street vehicles from Disneyland, along with the vocal ensemble and famous banjoist Pat Therio. Frontierland had can-can dancer Graciela, the Balcom's in a comedy ladder act, and Wally Boag, giving people on the East Coast the chance to see some of his Western antics. Like I said, Walt was so fond of Wally, and he knew that he was always capable of enchanting live audiences. But Walt also had Wally help out with his movies. Having been a very limber dancer, as you saw earlier, Wally was a perfect stunt double in the 1961 Disney movie The Absent-Minded Professor. Fred MacMurray's character was supposed to be jumping around with flubber on his shoes, but in reality, it was Wally on wires wearing a custom-made Fred MacMurray mask. Even without saying a word, Wally was able to create humor with his unique mid-air dance moves. Wally told me that he got really hurt while doing Absent-Minded Professor. During a break, he stayed behind and he was on the trampoline practicing some tricks. He ended up breaking his wrist, hitting his head, and knocking himself out. He was out cold when everybody came back in. He ended up shooting the scene a week later and he was fine. He was also given a small role as a television news reporter in that movie.
Well, sir, I calculate he gains about 18 inches to bounce.
And your opinion is?
About 7 o'clock tonight, he's going to be in serious trouble.
Even after Walt Disney's passing, Wally was still recognized as Disney's go-to entertainer who knew how to appeal to all ages. That's Wally at the back of the boat dressed as a pirate for the press event celebrating the grand opening of the Pirates of the Caribbean in Disneyland in 1967. Whoops, there goes his hat. I'll tell you a secret about the jacket that he's wearing that was told to me by the lady who designed it. Her name was Alice Davis and she was a friend of mine. She said she created it for the auctioneer in the attraction itself. That was a backup jacket for the audio animatronics figure, and she was so nervous that something would happen to it during Wally's performance. There he is as a dancing pirate. Look at him kick so effortlessly. His limber physical abilities were used in another movie, The Son of Flubber, a sequel to The Absent-Minded Professor. Watch him in this television commercial seen in the film.
I'm home, dear.
Is your kitchen a savage jungle teeming with perils and pitfalls?
Dear, where's the first aid? Stop clowning, George. You'll frighten the baby.
Incidentally, that baby that you're seeing there is Walt Disney's grandson, Walter Elias Disney Miller.
To flubberize your home.
I'm home, darling. Hi. Darling. Sweetheart. Oh, I got him.
Yes, folks, you'd coo too. If you belong to this happy flubber family, the family who can say proudly, they live in the house with the flubberolium floors.
Despite all his work while still performing in the Golden Horseshoe, Wally also found time to do charity work. This is a program from a show that Wally put together for a church fundraiser. Wally pulled out all the stops for this variety show called It's Vaudeville Again. Not only did he perform in it, but he also had the whole Horseshoe cast, including his sub for his days off, Bert Henry. He had Roy Williams, known as the Big Musketeer on the Mickey Mouse Club, the original voice of Donald Duck, Clarence Nash, and the Dapper Dans, the barbershop quartet from Disneyland. Also performing was a young 17-year-old Disneyland employee who went on to achieve great fame, Steve Martin. To this day, he gives Wally the credit as his inspiration. He even said that Wally was the influence behind his own version of balloon animals. Wally continued performing in the Golden Horseshoe Revue for thousands of shows. He spent a few years in Florida, opening and performing in the Diamond Horseshoe Revue in Walt Disney World. And while in Florida, he also entertained at the Top of the World restaurant and nightclub in Disney's Contemporary Resort. Wally returned to Disneyland, where he continued in the Golden Horseshoe Revue for another decade, until his last performance on January 28, 1982, after nearly 27 years. Wally was sent off with a great celebration. This photo is from that event. The audience was treated to his final performance before the festivities began. The room was filled with Wally's friends, family, co-workers, and celebrities too. I love this photo of Fulton, Broly, and Wally, and I have that script that Fulton's holding. Now, Fulton was the MC of the celebration, and this script has some of his handwritten notes in it. Okay, this line says, "Wally, you signed a 2-week contract and now it's up," nearly 27 years later. But that was true. His initial contract with Disney was for 2 weeks, and Fulton added about the 2-week contract, I don't know, or a contract that was 2-week. Now, Fulton also has some other notes in here, and there's some funny things, like when he sent Betty Taylor and I to a gig all the way to the Century Plaza on the wrong night. Or when Wally went to the Disneyland Hotel one night and did a show by himself for the wrong people. Now, you'll notice right under that it reads Vietnam. You see, in 1968, Wally, Fulton Broly, Betty Taylor, and other performers were supposed to do a USO tour for the American troops in Vietnam and Thailand, which is what this press release is for. Now, the show was Wally Boag and the Disneyland Show. Now, Wally told me when heightened conflicts broke out, the troop was instead sent to freezing cold Iceland. Here's some rare photos that belong to Wally's co-star Betty Taylor. During that trip, they encountered temperatures as low as 65 degrees below zero. It ended up being a 16,000-mile USO-sponsored tour covering Iceland, Greenland, Labrador, and Newfoundland. At each stop, they did a show for the children of the service families and a show for the adults that Wally called a little more gutsy. I could see in this photo that his cheek is stuffed with beans, so I guess they did that routine while they were there. Here's Wally in what looks like an impromptu balloon performance, delighting what seems to be some of the local children there. Wally's bio in the press release for this tour says that his first partner in show business was a girl of 12 whom he called to the stage of the London Hippodrome in 1948. That girl was Julie Andrews. You see, Wally did his balloon animals act, and then he asked, is there any little girl or boy in the audience who would like one of these? Young Julie went up on the stage and surprised Wally and the audience by singing a beautiful aria. After that, Julie was made part of the act at the Hippodrome. The audience was unaware of that, and they thought that he randomly chose someone. Wally remained good friends with Julie over the years, and she would often come to see him in the show at Disneyland. In 1963, during a performance of the Golden Horseshoe Revue for the press, Julie was planted in the back of the audience. When Wally asked, is there any little girl in the audience who would like one of these, a lady's voice from the back of the theater replied, "I would," and that was Julie. And Wally invited her up on the stage where the two did some comedy and sang a duet. Getting back to Wally's retirement, this script has messages which were sent in from people who couldn't attend, and that included some Hollywood legends. This one is from Lucille Ball, and it reads, "Dear Wally, I have never forgotten you and will always appreciate you as one of the greatest performers I have ever seen. There are so many things about you that I admire, including your dedication to your family and your life's work. You really are perfection. Thank you for the invitation, which I'm going to try desperately to honor. If I can arrange to be there, you can bet I will." Newspapers reported that she did attend, so maybe this message was ready to be read just in case. Funnyman Steve Martin wrote, "It is with great admiration and appreciation I wish you the best on this important day. As you know, I watched you hundreds of times, and the knowledge you gave me as a boy is still serving me today. Please accept this note as a big thank you. Your former spotlight operator, Steve Martin." Jim Henson, who created The Muppets, was a big fan of Wally's, and he invited him to perform on an episode of The Muppet Show where Wally did much of his routine from the Golden Horseshoe Revue, spitting out his teeth and everything. Here's what Jim wrote to Wally, or actually what Kermit the Frog wrote to Wally. Hi-ho to you from Kermit the Frog, coming to you by the miracle of the telegram, because there's no other way I can come to you. New York to Los Angeles is a long hop even for a frog. I would have taken the Concorde if possible, but I understand it was built by the French, and I have always made it a very strong policy to stay away from French people, especially around meal times. Another reason I didn't dare come is because Miss Piggy was miffed because she wasn't invited to saunter to Hollywood, and Fozzie couldn't come up with any good jokes about retiring. Although I don't know why, since he's been retired many times because of bad jokes. Hopping right along, the whole gang wishes you well, and from my bog to yours, much happiness. Love, Kermit the Frog, Jim Henson, and all of the Muppet people. The last message is from Julie Andrews. She wrote, Dear Wally, perhaps I may not be your oldest fan, but having known you for so many years, I do feel like it. This may be a final performance, but please don't go out of our lives forever. My love and thoughts tonight, Julie Andrews. As part of that big celebration, Wally was informed that his name had been placed on a window on Main Street, one of Disneyland's greatest honors. Here's a photo I took of it not too long ago with the masks of comedy and tragedy. A number of years ago, I was visiting Wally, and he showed me the replica that had been presented to him, but it wasn't the masks of comedy and tragedy. It was, appropriately, the masks of comedy and comedy. See, somewhere along the way, the real window had changed. I assume one of the workers thought it was a mistake, and maybe they didn't realize the humor in having two masks of comedy, since Wally was a comedian. Well, this really bothered me, and just recently I was able to get in touch with the right person, and Disneyland has restored the window to once again honor Wally with both masks of comedy. It's really nice to know that there's a lot of people at Disneyland who still care about its history. I'm also proud to have been instrumental in getting Wally and his Golden Horseshoe Revue co-stars Fulton Broley and Betty Taylor honored as Disney Legends back in 1995. In those days, the Disney Legends ceremonies were held on the Disney Studios lot. It's where I, as an employee, learned about so many of the great pioneers of the Walt Disney Company, most of who had worked with Walt Disney himself. The ceremony was only open to Disney employees and the press. Now, I want to share with you a clip of Wally at the ceremony, and you'll also see Roy E. Disney, Walt's nephew, who presented him with the award.
It's a thrill to be here, and naturally, it was 40 years ago I auditioned for Uncle Walt over there on stage 4. It was an empty stage except a piano player and myself, and Walt sat down. I did everything I knew. I do my vent act, I played the bagpipes, I did a dance routine. I blew up the balloons, the lecture in psychiatry, and I got through. I was exhausted, and he says, I'm opening a little park out in Anaheim, and I need a comic. And I said, well, I've been working in nightclubs, a lot. Well, I could clean it up. And as Walt says, I did, and my 2-week contract wound up with 27 years with the company.
What a thrill it was to see Wally receive this prestigious Disney honor. I love this photo of me and Wally that was taken on that day, the first time I ever met him. In 2024, the Country Bear Jamboree show in Walt Disney World was updated with a costume inspired by Wally. Disney artist extraordinaire Kevin Kidney and Jody Daly designed the costumes for the new Country Bear musical Jamboree. Kevin told me that the Imagineering team wanted something fun and slightly silly for Shaker. After several different ideas, Kevin and Jody were ultimately inspired by Wally's Pecos Bill costume from the Golden Horseshoe Revue. He said it was the perfect fit. Wally passed away in 2011 at the age of 90, and by coincidence, his longtime Golden Horseshoe co-star, Betty Taylor, passed away the following day. I was honored to be hired by Disneyland to help put together a memorial tribute for them, and this is the program from the event. On that night, a special poster was unveiled, which was to be hung inside the Golden Horseshoe. I was a consultant on that poster, providing facts and reference photos. It not only honors Wally and Betty, but Fulton Broley as well. It's now hanging up in there, so be sure to check that out the next time you're at Disneyland. Wally did so much more for Disney than what I've talked about, and all while he personally brought joy to so many guests, including me, at Disneyland, at Walt Disney World, and around the globe.